Fares, knowing what you have done in the sector and knowing your passion about, investing, impact investing, and also working with enterprises, we'd like you to share how can startups better connect with investors?
Hi everyone, my name is Fares. I work for Zeiss, a project implemented by GIZ, a German international corporation that strives for sustainable development. So Zeiss is an investment readiness program that supports startups across the continent during their fundraising journey. We mostly work with startups within the agtech and foodtech sectors, and we support them on several topics. I mean, how to leverage their data, how to improve their product, but most importantly, how they can establish a good fundraising strategy. So how we help them, I think it's super simple. From early on, a startup, all the stars need to be aligned. And this is a startup in general. So you need a good team, you need a team with experience, you need a market, you need an opportunity, you need funding, and then you also need the right macro environment, the right political situation. So many things need to happen to have that chance and build and grow and succeed. And then if you're Africa, this becomes even more harder. If you're in agri-tech, it's even more harder. So I think the way I like to support the startups that I work with is to tell them about this reality and tell them that building the product is not sufficient. And we are there to help them on the fundraising, which means they need to understand, they need to become corporate finance literate. They understand what the investors are appropriate for them. It doesn't have to be necessarily VC. It could be debt. It could be grant at some point and then become a business that can be sustainable. And then also we need to kind of like work together. They need to do this work at some point, but they need to also understand the expectations of the VCs. If you don't understand what the person in front of you is looking for, you will never be able to communicate to them what are the things that are part of your business that is going to make you attractive to their eyes. This is very important. And of course, because as I said earlier, funding is scarce, money is scarce, time is also scarce. So we are happy to jump in and to work with them on these topics.
Thank you very much. Let's pick it up from there. And I think one of the most important aspects that you have mentioned is about aligning the stars. And aligning the stars is not only about the companies, the businesses, and the investors. It's also about how do the business actually fit into the market. So I want to jump to Nick, and based on your experience at Delta 40, what strategies have you actually considered and maybe experienced are the most effective in trying to align the enterprises to the market?
Hello. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the question, Victor. So look, we've seen a couple kind of trends. To take a step back, when you look at climate tech, early stage ventures, it's really challenging for them to get initial investment. So just to note really quickly that on early investment, especially where there's a lot of hardware risk, it almost takes the whole ecosystem to come together and different folks that take risk and bring in their expertise to help a business get off the ground. And so at Delta 40, we are willing to take kind of pre-seed risk on hardware companies. We also have hardware experience in-house. And then within the ecosystem, we have things like talent that we can help you with, fundraising support, as Fares mentioned. We also can help you with actual industrial design and product development. So I think the first step is getting these companies off the ground, which is critical. And at Delta 40, we're extra passionate about that and helping founders navigate the full ecosystem to get all the support that they need. As far as finding eventual product market fit and kind of the right route to market, look, we've seen folks become vertically integrated as the only way to get their solution to scale. I think that's an incredibly expensive and kind of painful process. Only a few folks have pulled it off. What I think, or where I think we need to move as investors and as the kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem, is to engage corporates that are at scale, that have distribution, that have the customers in place, and find the right business model to partner with them. This type of partnership model is difficult for a founder because it's usually it's a long sales cycle. It's really difficult to navigate a corporate. And so we have to get these corporates engaged early. They usually have something related to, in this case, kind of climate as part of their overall mandate of where they're supposed to invest and make an impact, but they're not quite sure how to do it. And so at Delta 40, we're also doing our best to engage corporates early and helping them understand how to work with early stage businesses and help them achieve real scale. So there's been a few examples of where that's worked so far, but I think we could do a lot better, and it'd be a more capital efficient way to deliver real impact.
That's great. I mean, you have mentioned about the challenges of partnerships, and this is real for businesses because actually most of the time founders would spend, looking for capital, they would want to implement, and so there's usually a lot of oversight around which critical partners are actually helpful for that kind of growth. And now before I go to Jackie, I come to Joshua, and Joshua, you have worked with several startups in the solar sector. You have had some of them have done better. Some of them could be facing just certain challenges that you really want to share with us. What are some of those challenges, and relating it to what Nick has just mentioned, partnership and how it works?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think challenges would be better told over a bunch of beers and a lot of time. But I think maybe try to tie the 2 points together and then bring it back to this idea of green tech funding. I like your point a lot that you have to know your audience. So we always talk about, as an entrepreneur, you can either sell shares or you can sell a product, right? There's only a couple ways to bring capital into your business, or you can sell a story. So those are the 3 ways you can really bring capital into your business. And I want to say bridging this gap needs capital. Okay, what kind of capital? So if you're selling a story, that's grant funding. So grant funding is phenomenal. So as entrepreneurs, sell your dreams, sell your story, go out there, get that grant capital, help de-risk, ideally a commercial transaction. The next best capital to bring into your company is not selling shares, it's selling a product. So go sell a product, ideally to someone who can give you distribution, who's someone who can help you scale, because when you sell a product, it gives you the most valuable information in your company, which is your pricing information. It effectively means you're solving someone's problem and you're figuring out how big of a problem is that, what are the unit economics of that problem, how much will they pay me to solve it, how much do I have left over, and now how deep is that market? So ideally, you start to get some money into your company by selling a product, and then you have to go out and sell shares. And the same way you would do your customer discovery with a bank, what's your problem? How can I solve that? How do I iterate? How do I do my lean startup? You need to do it with your investor as well. So think about selling a product in one way and do the right customer discovery, but the same sales process you would take to selling a product, take it to selling shares. So, I mean, there's a lot of entrepreneurs here this week. I've had no entrepreneur, with all due respect, come up to me and say, hey, Josh, how does your fund work? What are your motivations, both from a LP standpoint as well as personal? How can I help you be successful? If you're an entrepreneur and you want to work with a venture capitalist, go ask those questions. And that venture capitalist will be way more willing to, I think, work with you. But if you have to have that knowledge in order to sell shares, in order to sell to that customer. So bridge that gap by selling a story, selling a product, and then selling some shares, but respect the customer, whether it's a VC or a bank or whoever else, throughout that process.
Great. So then we get to Jackie, and part of what would be interesting for Jackie to share with us is in several industries there have been a lot of successes, but there have also been failures, right? And in most cases, like you had the pitches before, it's about, we want to make money and we want to create a lot of impact, we want to transform. communities and markets. So in your view, what are some of the, or what would you mention as some of the characteristics of an impact unicorn, you know? So that we just know, I think the judges would be thinking of this very hard about what presentations have gone on, but you can give them the answer now. Give the next.
I am here to support. Look at all these gentlemen giving you microphones. And people have said chivalry is dead.
They are not up to ladies first. Eh? Okay, let's go on.
Thank you, Victor, and hi, everyone. That's a very interesting question when you talk about impacts, and maybe I'll just start by saying that unicorns are still a very rare phenomenon. We acknowledge that it's becoming increasingly common worldwide, but when you look at the African context, it's still very rare to come across unicorns. And for the few startups that have been able to achieve this status, this is mainly in the fintech space. And so when you look at it, it's because when it comes to building a business in Africa, there's still some challenges to be addressed. Even though Africa presents a promising ecosystem, there's still some challenges that need to be addressed to enable businesses to build and grow sustainably. One of it, you're looking at infrastructure deficits, you're looking at talent acquisition, fragmented markets. And so while all startups have to contend with these conditions, when it comes to impact space, there's an additional layer of complexity that they need to address in building. For example, if you look at the green ventures, in this case, they require, a large sum of funding that's patient and also a lot of working capital, given the fact that in addition to solving the problem they are solving, they also need to, deploy additional infrastructure and develop hardware, which is very expensive. And majority of companies in Africa are using equity to finance their infrastructure investments because there's not much funding options available to be able to, support these ecosystems. And so looking at the success stories of the companies that have demonstrated that it's possible to grow into a unicorn status in Africa, I'd say I think it requires the right approach. It also requires an understanding of the local context, which is very important. And over and beyond that, it also requires a lot of resilience. One, because it takes a long time to build a business. We are looking at, for example, the GDP on the continent being at $2.6 trillion, but it's spread across 54 countries, each with different economic development status, stability. And so it's also important to recognize the economic backdrop against which these companies operate as we consider investing in these companies and growing them to get to the unicorn status. And so with that said, I think for the impact space, some of the critical characteristics that would define potential impact company would be scalability. And this is looking at a business model that's adaptable and can be scaled globally while still maintaining impact. Looking at, for example, the innovation that you're coming up with, you need to be able to, innovate and come up with disruptive solutions that address critical social and environmental challenges. Stakeholder engagement and participation, I'd say, is also very critical in this case, as you involve the community, involve the government in your growth trajectory. And this is because when you look at impact, again, they are subject to special regulations, like requiring licenses, for example. So involving an ecosystem, and bringing together this ecosystem to work in a coordinated way is one of the key factors that can help drive impact unicorns into the continent.
Great, thanks a lot. And before I go to Nick, I would maybe now bring in Fares to be able to build on what Jackie has said, the ecosystem. So maybe you share with us some of the successful strategies and mechanisms that have helped, crowdfunding into your sector.
Well, not crowdfunding per se, but I would like to pick up on something that Jackie has said is working capital and understanding all of these financial terms that maybe founders don't pay attention to them at the beginning, and they are very important. I think when founders understand what working capital means, what's their cash conversion cycle, they can realize that what they're building won't be investable at some point. And from there, they can either give up, which would be the worst thing to do, or adjust their business model, or try to work with different partners, try to work with smaller customers, but who are willing to pay within a shorter amount of time, as opposed to focusing on getting the big guys who will only pay after 90 days or more, and then it will put you in a really tough situation, because this is not an equity-backed company, and that is expensive. So I think if you know about this at very early on, it's an opportunity for you to pivot and to do something like that. Now going back to your question, I think our program is tailor-made, and we support startups at different stages. So it really depends on, we might try to support. We have a team who just came back to Africa, and they were really good at what they're doing. They picked up some experience from overseas, but then when they came back to the continent, they lacked the network. So you can help them with the network. You know that they're good on this, but they lack the network. You can work with them to identify the investors that would talk to them. Other ways, we're also trying to do, I think this is something that we are proud at within our program. Again, talking about how can you grow your business, is to provide a working capital facility that's going to be a good test for the startup to understand whether they can service that debt at a small scale, and then they will get a better idea on what can they adapt to get that business, they will realize whether it is feasible to raise more debt at a higher interest rate, and so on and so forth.
All right. Thanks a lot. Now, Nick, a bit off the cuff, but you are running a venture facility that is supporting enterprises not only to attract capital, but also to grow their capacities. Yeah? I mean, do you have an experience of enterprises that have given up? And for what reason does that happen?
That have given up?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because you're
no one in
trying
the Delta 40 portfolio
and,
gives up.
In the process, they drop the ball.
I mean, to speak broadly, we know that, the average startup fails, right? And so I think we all know companies that didn't make it. I think what's been highlighted so far on the panel are a couple of reasons that have been kind of broad themes on the continent that have held companies back and that we're trying to address. I mean, one is this macroeconomic backdrop. If you're looking at Kenya, it's 120 billion GDP. It's $2,500 per capita. That's a pretty small market, to be honest. And so you have to develop a company that either creates and or owns an entire category to be successful, which is really challenging. You can bump into $1 billion market in San Francisco, and here you have to kind of create it yourself. That's really challenging. We're talking about financial literacy and how to prepare your business, one, to start making money by selling to customers, but also to optimize your cost of capital. And a lot of companies here are raising mostly equity. They don't really have a real path to get their cost of capital down. You've got Forex exposure, you've got really expensive capital, and businesses here take longer to build than in other markets and are just more challenging. So We have a mixture of like us as an ecosystem need to help companies early stage kind of prepare to raise debt. And we actually had a debt roundtable at Delta 40, even though our business is maybe a little too early to be raising debt, just to kind of get their heads around what a commercial bank is looking for day one, so they start building in that direction. And then the other one is around Pan-African scale, so that to really get to a place where you have real unicorn or impact unicorn type impact, and hopefully also commercial unicorn type impact, you have to be at Pan-African scale, and we all know that every market here is not the same. And so the reason why fintechs have been successful is they're able to go cross-border. They have their own regulatory challenges, but they don't have the boots on the ground type challenges that a lot of businesses that we work with will have as they enter one market to the next. So I think we as an ecosystem need to address these challenges one by one, and then support the founders that are doing the best they can to crack it, but might still come up short. I think that still happens more often than not.
Okay, so it's about supporting the enterprises one by one, right? And maybe to hear from Josh on how investors can better facilitate growth and sustainability, because I think this is the biggest question that everybody is asking. One, for risk capital to come in, they have to be sure that you are going to sustain a level of impact and commercial growth, even if you just share projections. I think the other side of it is that it's about the track record for the industry. So if too many fail, then investors then lose. They are not motivated to put in more money. So maybe you share what is it that investors have got to do to facilitate growth and sustainability. You can use any sector as an example.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the panel today, you have, two groups that are actively not only putting capital, but not only financial capital, but a lot of human capital into startups. So we're definitely not just a financial investor. And I think in a weird way, in a very real way, financial investing is very scalable. I hand you money, you go try to make it worth something, and I maybe support you a little bit or don't get in your way. But when you give people human capital, you're giving them networks, you're giving them expertise, you're giving them your time. So I think everyone on this panel today is putting their money where their mouth is by giving people their time and networks. Those things are invaluable. And then at the industry level, having groups like AVCA, and we have SAVCA down in South Africa that are trying to pull some stuff together and coordinate. And I'll give props to our Africa Arena crew for just getting everyone together. Like, this is part of the process of supporting founders. And I think putting it back on the founders, it's to ask for help. It's to ask for very specific help. I think there is a bit of I don't know if it's a negative sentiment in the market that once you get money from someone, you can't ask for help. Please ask for help. Please be honest, and then also be specific in the support that you need. If I need a financial model, if I need family advice. We work pretty deep. You end up being pretty deep with humans in this process. So I think we are, as a sector, supporting our entrepreneurs. With the hope that we'll have a couple of unicorns that we can all point to, both from a commercial as well as impact standpoint, and hold those up there as a beacon. But I think we're doing it. We can probably do it a bit more. But if I can put it back on the entrepreneurs, ask for help, ask for specific support.
Great. I will come to the audience shortly, and we will expect that you ask. We allow for about 3 questions. But then back to Jackie. So your role as the COO at EAVCA is a very critical one in trying to convene and influence, policy around a supportive environment that can make enterprises flourish. What do you take of the fact that there is still a lot of policy limitations that actually affect sustainability of enterprises, and how does this need to be addressed going forward?
Thank you. I think, for one, there's knowledge gaps, and this is on the policymakers' side that needs to be addressed. So there's need for a lot of knowledge and capacity building, and just basically educating the policymakers on the different nuances of the different industries that they are trying to regulate, which is what we do as part of our core mandate at IAVCA, so knowledge and education of policymakers. There's also a bit of fragmentation in terms of how the ecosystem works, in the sense that the collaborative aspect is, not as sufficiently developed per se, so a lot of people working independently. And so because of that, you tend to find that there's an overlap in many cases. And I think what needs to happen is a lot more of strategic partnerships and collaborations that include both the public and the private sector. Thank you.
Yes, strategic partnerships. Now we come to the audience. Someone will help me with the microphone, and we take at most 3 questions.
I wanted to be the first one to ask, actually, because we've
the
got
best case scenario is that you ask last.
Yeah, that would actually be dope. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
I like it. Any questions on here for folks?
And it would also be good if there's none.
That means you're clear. Any questions at all? Yes, there's one. Here we go.
God. All right. So just shoot your question. Say who you want you want the response from. It would also be good to say your name.
All right. My name is Lillian. I work with UNDP. My question is more, as you look ahead, this is to anyone who wants to answer this, where do you see the green tech innovation ecosystem kind of going to? Because this is a space that's continuing to evolve quickly, and there's a lot happening, especially with the climate change conversations. So I was wondering, in terms of where you see the space going, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now.
All right, looking ahead, yeah? So we take the next
one.
Mm-hmm.
Is there another question? Yes, there's one over there.
Yes, I'm Timothy
from
the county government of Vihiga. Just a quick question on the aspect of policy. And it's open for anyone who can answer, how are your different organizations collaborating with county governments and even the national government on policy making? What are some of the structures, and what are some of the approaches which we can take who are in government to initiate the process? Thank you.
Right.
Policy specifically on climate change. Yeah.
Policy specific climate change. Anyone else before I? No.
A
yes.
third one.
Where did you? Where?
Yes.
Okay. Did you put your hand up as well? Yes, you did.
I actually had the same type of question that he's asking, but really specific to the VCs. Like Jacqueline said, she spoke about policies. It's IAVCA, right? So what are the tangible examples about, how the VCs have been working with policy, makers to be able to enhance the green tech financing, basically?
All right. Allow the panelists to take
just one more and then we're good.
One more.
Yes, one more and then we're good.
Thank you. Open question to everybody on the panel. Thanks for a really engaging discussion. So in this market, especially climate, with Africa, market difficult to raise capital, and also being pitted against the rest of the world in terms of innovation, what's one quality that founders shouldn't really overlook, especially when trying to get things off the ground in trying to optimize for the long term? Thanks.
All right. I will give the panelists free will to jump into any other. We start with, you want to start, Nick?
Sure. Let me start first on the policy side, because this is a really tricky one. I can only really speak to the local context here in Kenya. We recently had an Indaba at Delta 40 that we hosted for e-mobility, and a big component of that was policy. The landed cost of EVs is a real challenge in the market here. And so obviously there's lots of folks that want to work with the government to reduce the cost of bringing electric vehicles in. One of the main challenges here is that the finance bill is kind of looked at on an annual basis. And so how do you as a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur make real plans for your business when every year that changes? And so one thing is to talk with regulators about how we can look a little further than 12 months. And that was a big part of the conversation. And I think there's been really good feedback from folks in government. Obviously, it's challenging when the entire government changes, so the presidential cycle, but I do think that folks were listening. So yeah, I think that's the first one, is we have to get out of this kind of annual cycle, which is really challenging to plan for. Yeah, I'll wait for the other questions.
All right. A minute each. The forward look. Josh?
I'll actually use Nick's to build on the forward piece, which, I mean, as a species, right, we need to figure this thing out. This is probably a multi-generational transition. It took like 5 generations to get us here. Hopefully it will take us 1 or 2 to get out of it, but this is going to take a while. So I would look at this as a long game, and policy is a massive part of it, because I was at a conference at Stanford recently, and we discussed command and control, right? So really one of the major policies in the world that's worked, whether it be in U.S. energy or whatever else, I mean, cross-border mechanisms, is the government saying, here's your cap. You can sort it out now, but government policy is going to drive a lot of climate adoption, because economics aren't there right now. It's just not happening fast enough. So as an entrepreneur, as an investor, you have to not only have a real view on what is the policy thing that's going to tip. Like, there's going to be a tipping moment in a lot of this stuff. A, we need to have a view on it, and then B, we need to drive towards it. And I love what Delta 40 did there to bring together a consortium of people of different backgrounds. So there's no real agenda other than to say, hey, there's critical mass happening. And it happened in Pago Solar as well. And once we got enough scale, we could go to governments and say, here's what we need. Like, here's what the tipping point will look like to make this economic. So I think to tie the two together, we have to understand what policies are going to drive a tipping adoption, and then work together towards those in a very coordinated manner. And then the last piece, getting back to green tech funding, is as an entrepreneur, you have to stay alive long enough. As a VC, we have to stay alive long enough to wait for that tipping moment, but build a business that can sustain and then can be right there at the tip of the spear when the thing tips, and you'll own that market. But you have to figure out when it's going to tip.
All right.
Yeah, just to add on to what my colleagues have said about policy, I think the other important factor is, and this is especially when working with governments, is being able to demonstrate the economic impact of these sectors. So building a case through data and data, just showing the impact of the new changes, and just technically building a case for review, because without the data, which is also a challenge to get, and so as an association, we are lucky enough to have a group of, working groups that come together to help in data collection and just be able to put that together.
All right.
Was there the last question about I didn't get a 100%, but I would say resilience and patience. That's what's needed for an entrepreneur in general, but even more in Africa. And since my colleagues addressed all of the questions, just a tiny announcement. Okay.
Fares was trying to take the work of the moderator.
Did we miss one, Victor? Was there one question
you want to add something?
The future of green tech?
It's a bit answered, but if you want to add something, you can, yeah.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. But one thing I think we're seeing in the market is a lot of the technologies we're seeing have a huge component of their business model that's reliant on carbon finance and carbon credits. And I think if we zoom out, like on a 30-year scale, we're all kind of believe that that's going to go up and to the right, but we're seeing obviously a lot more turbulence kind of near term. And so I think we'll see more business models in that space that are a little bit more durable in respect to how reliant they are on carbon credits and carbon finance. And so I don't think it'd be 100% commercial without any kind of carbon revenue, but I think we're seeing the proportion between the kind of commercial side and the carbon side coming together a bit. Yeah.
So I think generally what is being said here is to drive policy, you have to demonstrate value, right? That's what influences policy change to a direction that can support. Spend half a minute, each of you, to make your last remark. Nick.
Back. Last remark. I mean, first off, a shameless plug for Delta 40. If you are an African or female entrepreneur in this space, I'd love to speak to you afterwards. That's the first bit of my remark. The second one is, look, we've been through this kind of another cycle, and there was this kind of very exuberant cycle where money was cheap. There's an exuberant cycle where carbon revenue was flying, and we're now in an environment of scarcity, focused around profitability, and a different kind of headset. And I would not confuse that with not being optimistic about what is going on in the space. I actually think the best companies are going to be built right now. And I'm really excited to see the entrepreneurs that are coming out of this, much more challenging space. They're focusing on their financial literacy early on, getting their economics right. They're thinking of a route to market that makes the most sense long term. They're making a lot of really good decisions early days. And so I know that's kind of the general kind of cloud over the ecosystem, but I'm super optimistic. And yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah, picking up on Nick's point on profitability. So long-term sustainability versus short-term profitability, I'd say should be the future, because if you look at the trend, there's a lot of impact ventures on the continent already, but a lot of them have not been able to scale yet. And so in order to achieve sustainability, I think it's important to focus on your consumer, your end consumer, as your first point of contact when you're thinking of investors, to just drive revenues and build you into profitability. Thank you.
Great. I'm trying to think of a good parting remark to tie it all together, but I think for Prajay's question there too, around founder characteristics, you have to be obsessed with the problem. Just be absolutely obsessed with the problem and figure out if it takes 5 years to solve it or 30 years to solve it, you're going to solve it. It might take a couple iterations to get there, but go solve that problem and be really, really devout on it. And then one maybe other point to make too is I think one of the discussions we need to start having more is around SME versus VC. We were chatting about this before. There's nothing wrong with building an SME. There's nothing wrong with employing 10 to 20 people and being able to feed your family and do the work, and that's awesome. VC does require everything's different. And I'd put it back on entrepreneurs and on the VC community to really understand what VC risk profile looks like, what returns need to look like, what that whole thing is going to mean for you, your business, your family, and everybody else. And then let's go build both. Let's build SMEs that are durable and cash flow positive and employ people and are amazing for the backbone of an economy. But if you're going to go build a VC, maybe to go full circle to my keynote this morning, do something insane. Go crazy and try to do the most insane, big, scalable, wild thing you can do and put it all in black and give it a twirl. But let's really start to differentiate between the two types of business models.
Great. And Fares, make your last remark and, of course, the announcement that you needed to make. Yeah.
Well, I would like to end on a positive note because we've been talking a lot about challenges. So regardless of all the challenges that you might come across, we're still in an area, on a continent where there is some help. There are like programs like ours, like people who are willing to help, grants available, whether it's for being investment ready or like for topics like ESG. Every of those things are opportunities for entrepreneurs to learn, to become like better professionals, and yeah, so take advantage of these opportunities. And then I can easily link that to my latest remark. So please, if you're interested in building an AgTech, our call for application just closed yesterday. But if you speak to me or to my colleagues, we will give you a secret code to be able to apply. So please talk to us, and thank you.
Great. So Fares is saying after this, talk to him and you will get money, right? All right. So we close at this point. Thank you very much, panelists, for the valuable contributions you have made. Thank you very much for the audience.
Nice. Thank you so much, Nick, Joshua, Jacqueline, Fares, and Victor. Let's give them a hand for their time.